Michael could hardly believe what he was seeing. A woman had just been hit by a car and left to fend for herself. This tragic incident was what brought Jessica into his life, and that stranger would become someone very important to him, changing his destiny in an unexpected way. Hello, my friends. I am Linda, and this is Linda's Love Stories. I hope you enjoy this story. Michael was returning home after yet another exhausting social event. As the heir and public face of the family business, his presence was constantly required at these commitments. Superficial conversations, obligatory handshakes, and forced laughter filled his nights with an unbearable frequency. Michael detested all the falseness and ostentation that permeated the business world. As he drove through the illuminated streets of the big city, his thoughts wandered between the monotony of his routine and the emptiness he felt in his personal life. The dashboard clock showed it was almost midnight, reminding him of how late it had gotten. The streets were beginning to empty, with only a few cars circulating around him. Suddenly, something unexpected happened. A car in front of him suddenly accelerated, running a red light at high speed. Before Michael could process what was happening, he saw a figure crossing the street being violently hit by the out-of-control vehicle. Instinctively, Michael slammed on the brakes, stopping his car in the middle of the street. His wide eyes followed the car that had caused the accident as it simply fled, offering no assistance whatsoever. Without a second thought, Michael got out of his vehicle and ran towards the victim lying on the asphalt. As he approached, he saw that it was a young woman. She was trying to get up with visible difficulty, groaning in pain. Michael knelt beside her, gently placing his hand on her shoulder. "Don't move. I'm going to call an ambulance," he said, already pulling his phone from his pocket. "No need, I'm fine," the woman replied, trying to get up again. However, as she took the first step, she staggered and nearly fell, being supported by Michael. "You're not well at all. Let me help you, please," he insisted. After a few minutes of arguing, Michael finally managed to convince the young woman to accept his help. Carefully, he assisted her into his car and set off towards the nearest hospital. During the journey, Michael discreetly observed his passenger through the rear-view mirror. She appeared to be around 25 years old, with dishevelled brown hair and simple, worn-out clothes. Her face, though injured, had delicate features and expressive eyes that showed a mixture of pain and distrust. As they were approaching the hospital, the woman spoke for the first time since getting into the car. I can't afford to pay for a hospital like this," she said, noticing the sophistication of the neighbourhood they were entering. "Don't worry about that now. I'll take care of everything," Michael replied in a reassuring tone. At the emergency room, Michael waited patiently while the young woman was attended to. After some exams and procedures, the doctor informed them that she had suffered a fracture in her left arm, a dislocation in her right ankle, and various scratches and bruises all over her body. The arm was cast, and the ankle was immobilized. When she came out of the consultation room, Michael offered to take her home. It was then that the woman, who finally introduced herself as Jessica, revealed that she didn't have a fixed place to live. She alternated between sleeping at acquaintances' houses and on the city's streets. Faced with this information, Michael felt a pang in his chest. Without hesitation, he made a decision that would change the course of their lives. "Jessica, if you don't mind, I would like to offer my house so that you can recover properly," he proposed. Jessica looked at him with a mix of surprise and distrust. "Why would you do that for a stranger?" she asked. "Because it's the right thing to do," Michael replied simply. After some reluctance, Jessica accepted the offer. During the drive to Michael's house, a comfortable silence settled between them. Jessica observed the scenery through the window, while Michael pondered over the strange series of events that had led him to this situation. Upon arriving at Michael's house, Jessica couldn't contain a sigh of admiration. The house was imposing, with a classic architecture and well-tended gardens. Michael led her inside, aware of the awkwardness she seemed to feel. "Unfortunately, the guest room is a mess. I don't usually have visitors," he explained. "You can stay in my room tonight. I'll sleep on the couch in the living room." Jessica tried to protest, but Michael insisted. He took her to the master bedroom, showed her where the essential things were, and wished her a good night. As he settled down on the living room couch, Michael reflected on how his monotonous life had been suddenly stirred by this unexpected encounter. The following morning, Michael woke up to the sound of footsteps in the house. It was his housekeeper, Rita, arriving. Seeing Michael on the sofa, she furrowed her brow in confusion. "Mr. Michael, what are you doing sleeping here?" she asked. Michael briefly explained the situation, mentioning that there was a woman in his bedroom. Rita, a middle-aged woman who had worked for him for years, became visibly embarrassed. "Mr. Michael, you don't need to explain anything to me," she said, mistakenly interpreting the situation. "It's not what you're thinking, Rita," Michael quickly clarified. "I'm just helping someone who needed it. Now I need to go to work, but please, assist her with whatever she needs. She's hurt and probably weak. Oh, and if you could also tidy up the guest room, I would appreciate it." Rita nodded, still a little confused, but accepting her boss's explanation. Michael quickly got ready and left for another day of work. When Michael returned from work in the late afternoon, he was surprised by a sound he hadn't heard in his house for a long time: laughter. Following the sound, he found Jessica and Rita in the kitchen, engaged in a lively conversation. "Your friend is really very funny, Mr. Michael," Rita commented upon seeing him. "I hope she stays around for a while." Michael observed Jessica, who was smiling shyly. There was something about her, an infectious energy that seemed to light up the room. Without thinking much, he found himself saying, "Jessica, you can stay here as long as you need to fully recover." In the days that followed, Michael and Jessica got to know each other better. He discovered that she was an orphan and had grown up in the foster care system. During her childhood, Jessica earned scholarships that allowed her to attend good schools, but upon reaching adulthood, she found herself without a place to call home. For Michael, coming home and finding Jessica became a breath of fresh air in his otherwise predictable life. She was fun, lively, and brought a completely different perspective to the things he always took for granted. As the days passed, a true friendship began to blossom between them. A month passed by quickly. Jessica had already recovered considerably from her injuries. One afternoon, she approached Michael with a serious expression. "Michael, I think it's time for me to leave," she said, avoiding direct eye contact. At that moment, Michael felt something unexpected, a tightness in his chest at the thought of Jessica leaving. He realized that he didn't want her to go. Without thinking much, he made a proposal. "Jessica, how about working at my company? You could learn a profession and continue living here until you're able to establish yourself independently." Jessica's eyes widened in surprise. You would do that for me?" she asked, incredulous. "Of course," Michael replied with a smile. "You're intelligent and a quick learner. I'm sure you'll do very well." Thus, Jessica began working at Michael's company. As he had predicted, she adapted quickly and soon won the sympathy of the other employees with her captivating personality and dedication to work. When Jessica received her first paycheck, she spoke again about moving out. It was at that moment that Michael realized that his feelings for her had transformed into something deeper than friendship. "Jessica, I don't want you to go," he confessed. "I've fallen in love with you." The silence that followed seemed to last an eternity. Then, to Michael's surprise and joy, Jessica smiled and said, "I've fallen in love with you too, Michael." Their relationship naturally blossomed. Life with Jessica was light and full of joy, something Michael had never experienced before. However, as time passed, rumours about the romance between the millionaire heir and the former homeless woman began circulating within the company and high society. Michael's mother, an elegant woman with strong opinions, called a family meeting to clarify the situation. In a room filled with relatives sporting expressions of disapproval, she addressed the issue. "Michael, dear, you could have any woman you wanted. Why this unusual choice?" she asked, barely disguising her discontent. "Because I chose Jessica, Mom," Michael replied firmly. and she chose me. The family tried to argue, citing social differences and possible ulterior motives on Jessica's part, but Michael remained steadfast in his decision. Months went by, and Michael and Jessica's relationship only grew stronger. Then, one Sunday morning, Jessica surprised Michael with news that would change their lives forever. "Michael, I am pregnant," she announced, a mix of happiness and apprehension in her voice. The news of the pregnancy was received with joy by the couple, who felt fulfilled and ready for this new chapter. However, Michael's family and some of his colleagues had a very different reaction. Mocking and malicious comments, along with disapproving looks, became frequent. "She was just waiting for this opportunity," some whispered. "Now she has indeed secured her place in the family." Michael and Jessica chose to ignore the criticism and focus on their happiness. The months of pregnancy were filled with preparation and anticipation. The birth of little Thomas brought indescribable joy to the couple. Michael, who had always been so focused on his career, discovered a new purpose in fatherhood. Jessica, in turn, proved to be a loving and dedicated mother. The first months were a period of adjustment. Sleepless nights, diaper changes, bottles to prepare. But every smile, every small milestone the baby reached, made it all worthwhile. Michael often found himself admiring Jessica as she rocked Thomas to sleep, amazed by the family they had built. Meanwhile, in the outside world, things were not so idyllic. The pressure from Michael's family was increasing. They urged him to come to his senses, even suggesting that Jessica and the baby be sent to live elsewhere with a generous allowance. At work, Michael began to notice subtle changes. Some important decisions were being made without his input, and meetings were being rescheduled without his knowledge. He noticed the pitying or disdainful looks that some colleagues cast at him in the hallways. It was during this turbulent period that Michael began to question his priorities. He observed the simplicity and joy with which Jessica lived each day, how she cherished the small moments with Thomas. He compared it to the life he used to lead, full of empty commitments and superficial relationships. One night, while watching Jessica and Thomas sleep peacefully, Michael made a decision that would change the course of their lives once again. 2 years had passed since that fateful night when Michael met Jessica. Thomas was now a smart and energetic little boy, the joy of the house. On a sunny Sunday afternoon, Michael called a family meeting at his mansion. The family arrived, curious and apprehensive. Everyone settled into the spacious living room, inquisitive eyes directed at Michael, who stood next to Jessica, holding Thomas in his arms. "Thank you all for coming," Michael began, his voice firm and determined. "I have an important announcement to make." The silence in the room was palpable. Michael paused, looked at Jessica, who nodded encouragingly, and continued. "I bought a farm on the outskirts of town. Jessica, Thomas, and I are moving there next week." Whispers of surprise and confusion filled the room. Michael's mother was the first to speak up. "But Michael, dear, what are you saying? And the company? Your responsibilities?" Michael smiled, a serene smile that no one there was used to seeing. "I'm resigning from controlling the company," he announced, causing a new wave of shocked exclamations. "I've sold my shares to the other shareholders. I only retain a small stake, but I won't have any active role in the business anymore." Michael's older brother, visibly upset, questioned, "Have you gone mad? Are you going to throw away everything our family has worked for over generations?" "No," Michael replied calmly. "I am choosing a life that makes me happy, a life with purpose and meaning." He turned to Jessica, taking her free hand while she held Thomas. "In the past 2 years, I've learned more about happiness and fulfillment than in my entire previous life." The room fell silent, everyone processing what they had just heard. Michael continued. "The farm we bought needs a lot of work. We're going to restore it, make it productive again. We want to raise Thomas in contact with nature, away from this incessant pursuit of status and power that dominates our lives here." He looked at each member of his family, his eyes conveying a mix of determination and hope. "I know it's difficult for you to understand now, but I hope one day you can visit us and see for yourselves the life we've chosen. You will always be welcome." Reactions varied. Some family members expressed disbelief, others were visibly irritated. But to Michael's surprise, his grandmother, a quiet lady who seldom spoke at these gatherings, stood up from her armchair and walked over to him. She looked at Michael, then at Jessica and Thomas, and smiled. "My dear," she said, her voice trembling with emotion, "you have finally found what is truly important. I am proud of you." Her words seemed to dissipate some of the tension in the room. Gradually, some family members approached to say their goodbyes, still confused but respecting Michael's decision. In the weeks that followed, Michael, Jessica and little Thomas moved to the farm. The property was old, with a main house that needed renovations and several sheds and structures that had long been unused. The work was hard but rewarding. Michael, who had never done manual labour in his life, found unexpected satisfaction in fixing fences, painting walls, and tending the land. Jessica, with her creativity and energy, transformed the house into a welcoming and lively home. Thomas grew up strong and happy, running through the fields and playing with the animals that gradually populated the farm. His laughter echoed throughout the property, a melody that filled his parents' hearts with joy. At night, sitting on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky with golden hues, Michael and Jessica reflected on the journey that had brought them there. From a casual meeting on a fateful night to a life they had never imagined, but now would not trade for anything. "Do you have any regrets?" Jessica asked once, her head resting on Michael's shoulder. He looked at her, at Thomas playing on the lawn, and at the vastness of the farm they now called home. "Not for a second," he replied, smiling. "Here, in this simplicity, I found everything I always sought without knowing." If you enjoyed, please give it a like and subscribe to the channel. Leave a comment with a number from 1 to 5 to let us know how much you liked the story. Also, watch the video that is currently on your screen. See you soon.